Well, good evening. Hope everything is going well in your world tonight, wherever you may be. This is the Wednesday night live stream of the Clarksville Highway Church of Christ. And I'm Jeff Henry. I'm the youth minister here at Clarksville Highway. And just want to welcome everybody in wherever you're at. And just thank you for joining us. We're going to continue this series that I started a couple weeks ago. If you've been with us, I've been doing a series, Greg's been doing a series, and we've been switching off each week. And so we're going to continue on this series that I started a couple weeks ago, and it's entitled, What Would Blank Do? So it's kind of this study of the response of biblical characters to what they would do in difficult times, difficult circumstances. And it's this phrase that's a play off of the old phrase, what would Jesus do, right? Or WWJD. And that was a popular phrase back in the 90s, and maybe it still is, but especially then. And it was just this kind of like standard of living for people and this behavior guide for them individually and for churches themselves. So instead of what would Jesus do, we're going to look at different biblical characters and see what they would do, how they would react, and how they would let their faith be their guide in those hard times. And so what would Jesus do this week is what would Joseph do? Still WWJD, but it's Joseph this time around. So I hope everyone's doing well. Just making sure our audio is working well. I had an audio issue last week, so I'm going to just double check on that and make sure all is well on that front. All right. It seems to be working well, so glad not having any issues on that. So like I said, what would Joseph do is where we're going to jump into this week. And so in order to really know what Joseph would do, we got to know his story, right? And so I know it's a really long story through, 13, 14 chapters of Genesis, but hang with me as we quickly kind of run through that. We're not going to read all of it, but we are going to run through there quickly. Hit some highlights. So the first kind of text we're going to get to is Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 8. And this is kind of the beginning, right? This is the dream and then the selling. I'm going to get us there. All right. Sorry, I couldn't see my clicker up there. All right, so Genesis chapter 37. Let me drop out the screen there. Starting in verse 1. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan, and these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age. This is important to the story. And he made him a robe of many colors. Probably heard of that, right? But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I've dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And then we're going to jump down to verse 18. So they hate him. They despise him enough that they're going to try to kill him. They get talked out of trying to kill him, and instead they're going to sell him into slavery. So verse 18, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer," right? They're mocking him. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hand, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, And they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. All right, so the first little section, right? He has the dream. He tells his brothers, probably not a good idea to tell your brothers that they're gonna bow down to you eventually. Then they devise this plan to sell him into slavery, and Joseph is taken to Egypt. So jump forward a couple chapters. Joseph is in Egypt, and he is working in Potiphar's house, right? And so in Potiphar's house, he has the job of second in command, right? Just under Potiphar. He's an officer for him. And crazy thing happens there. So let's pick up in chapter 39, verse 1. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had brought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome. This is where the story gets important, right? Or more important. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. Let me get out of the way here so we can see this. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried out. He left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought amongst us came in to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted out my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house." And as soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So God is continuing to be with him in the midst of this difficult time. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. All right, so switch back here. Right, Potiphar's house, prison, because Potiphar's wife accuses him of trying to sleep with her. And that's actually not the case. Joseph tried to flee because he didn't want to sin against God or his master. And so now Joseph's in prison, right? He's been sold into slavery to Egypt. Now he's in prison. And then while he's in prison, these dreams start to happen, right? So we're going to skip over chapter 40, but in prison with him is the cupbearer and a baker. They have some dreams. He interprets them for them. One of them gets put back into their position in Pharaoh's court, and Joseph tells him, "Remember me, so I can also get out of here." And he forgets about him until Pharaoh starts having dreams. So chapter 41, Pharaoh begins to have dreams, and he asks of Joseph to help him interpret them. So starting in verse 14 this time, Genesis chapter 41, verse 14, Pharaoh's dreams. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." And Joseph answered Pharaoh, "It is not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer." It's important, right? He's saying it's from God. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Behold, in my dream I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came out of the Nile and fed in the reed grass. And 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I had never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly and thin as before. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dream 7 ears growing on one stalk, full and good. 7 ears withered, thin, and blighted by the east wind, sprouted after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me." Verse 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears, blighted by the east wind, are also 7 years of famine." So he's saying, hey, the dreams are the same thing. You're going to have 7 great years, and you're going to have 7 years of famine. And so he interprets his dream, and then because of because of Joseph being able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, he gets put into a high position in Pharaoh's court and appointed as overseer of the land to make sure that when those 7 years of famine come, they will be able to sustain them and make their way through that difficult time, right? So Joseph has been sold into slavery. He has been put into prison. Now he's been taken out of prison, and he's one of the highest ranking people in all of Egypt. And so, again, we'll continue chapter 42. This is where it gets kind of juicy, right? Joseph's brothers come to Egypt because they need some help during this famine time, right? So chapter 42, verse 5 through 17. We'll switch over there. "Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them." So his brothers come and they bow down before him, just like he thought, or what he saw in his dream. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them, and he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." And he said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see, And they said, We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, It is as I said to you. You are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place, unless your youngest brother comes here. He's like, You're spies. I want to see it. You're not honest men. You're being spies. I want to see all your brothers. You're holding one back. So send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. All right. So, again, another part of Joseph's story comes into play here, right? His brothers come. He recognizes them. They bow down before him just as he expected from the dream. And then he kind of gets his revenge by throwing them in prison for a few days, right? And accusing them of being spies. Then he puts them to the test later on in chapter 40, Genesis chapter 44. So Joseph has this test for them in Genesis 44, and again, we're talking about what would Joseph do. He's doing some good things, and he's doing some not so good things thus far. So Genesis chapter 44, starting in verse 1. Let's switch there. And let me get off the screen. All right. Then he commanded the steward of his house, Fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. And put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest with his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph told him. As soon as the morning was light, the men sent away with their donkeys. They had gone only a short distance from the city. Now Joseph said to his steward, Up, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, Why have you repaid evil for good? Right? Joseph's like, we've done good for them, we've given them food, we've sent them back, but he still had one more test he wanted to put them through, which was planting that silver in Benjamin's bag. Is it not from this that my Lord drinks, and by this that he practices divination? You have done evil in doing this. When he overtook them, he spoke to them these words. They said to him, Why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Right? They completely deny it because they didn't know about it. Behold, the money that we found in the mouths of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Whichever of your servants is found with it shall die, and we also will be my Lord's servants. He said, Let it be as you say. He who is found with it shall be my servant, and the rest of you shall be innocent. Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. And he searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. So he puts them to the test, right? And it's like, okay, I want to see what they're going to do when their youngest brother, is again facing difficult circumstances, right? Facing a difficult task in life. And if they're going to be cowards and get rid of him like they did to me, or they're going to do something differently. All right, so then we skip over to chapter 45, and he kind of reveals himself, right? They've been brought back, and he's going to reveal himself to his his identity to his brothers. Starting in verse 1. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, Make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, Come near to me, please. And they came near. And he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord over all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord over all of Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children, and your children's children, and your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell your father of all my honor in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. And then skip over to verse 25. So this is where they leave. So they went out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. They tell Jacob, hey, we found Joseph. And they said, Joseph is still alive. He's the ruler over all the land of Egypt. And his heart became numb, for he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. So Joseph reveals who he is to his brothers, and then he requests them to go get his dad so that his dad will know that he is alive as well. And they bring them all back to Egypt because it's going to be 5 more years of famine, right? And then they get to live there and just celebrate Joseph being alive still, right? It's this great story of Joseph being in the right place at the right time to do these tasks that God had for him, but would never have happened if not for his brothers selling him to slavery way back when. And so one last little section of scripture, Genesis chapter 50, to kind of sum this up for us. And this is Joseph's forgiveness, right? He's revealed himself to his brothers, told them who he is, and now Jacob has died, and they think, oh crap, now Jacob's dead, Joseph's going to get back at us now. He's going to get his revenge because he was just putting on a good face for Jacob. But now that Jacob's dead, we think he's going to do something for it. And then Joseph again shares his heart with his brothers and forgives them. And it's this beautiful picture. And so it starts in Genesis chapter 50, verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph, saying, Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell before him and said, Behold, we are your servants. Right? They're like, hey, we're going to devise this plan. We're going to tell him this is what Dad said before he died. Hopefully he'll forgive us and we'll be okay. But Joseph said to them, Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Right, so you get this beautiful picture of his forgiveness and said, I know what you guys meant. You meant evil, and you had this evil plan in mind, but God meant it all for good, right? God had this great, grand plan in mind for this exact moment, right? For many people to be saved by the interpretation of his dreams. And so you get this whole story. You get the whole picture of Joseph now, right? I hope you got a grasp of it. What would Joseph do WWJD. What would Joseph do? This godly man that we think so highly of, what would he do? I think he would probably do a lot like a lot of us would, right? And he did do a lot like a lot of us would. It wasn't all good. Some of the things Joseph did, recap from chapter 37. He was that annoying little brother that upset his brothers, right? What would Joseph do? He would be an annoying little brother and upset his brothers. Chapter 39, he would keep from sin in Potiphar's house, right? This is important. He did not want to sin against God. Good thing. He would use his gift from God to help the world, right? To be there in that time of famine to help people. But he would also get his revenge by imprisoning his brothers. He would also test them by planting the silver cup on Benjamin. But then he would reveal his identity and glorify God in it all. And then finally, he would forgive and realize God's plan for all of it. And so the point of this is not to say, run Joseph through the mud, right? But instead show that he was human. So he made some mistakes along the way, sure. But he also had some amazing moments of trust and integrity in God's plans and integrity himself. Like I said, I'm not saying do everything that Joseph did. I'm also not saying don't do some of the things that Joseph did, right? It's a little bit of both. It's a mixture. Maybe not make your siblings so angry they want to kill you. That's probably a good place to start of things we shouldn't do. What would Joseph do? Make his siblings so angry they want to kill him. Probably shouldn't seek revenge. Probably shouldn't try to plant something on someone to make them look like a thief. Those are probably things that we should not do, right? But that's the beauty of this WWJD, right? It's this, what would they do? It gives us guidance of what not to do and what to do. Joseph would have these good and bad moments, right? But when that whole situation, that whole moment, the whole culmination of his life came to an end, or was coming to an end, the final few things he did are probably the most important things. The final few things he did was to give his brothers a second chance and to forgive. Right? If there's one thing that we should get out of this, is that we as Christians should be people that give second chances and people that forgive. I'll say it again because I think it's really important. If there's one thing we should get out of this whole message, it is that we as Christians should be people that give second chances and people that forgive. Period. I don't want to know about all the drama associated with those things. God doesn't want to know about all the drama associated with those things. He wants you to give second chances. He wants you to forgive. So, as you think about that, who in your life needs a second chance from you? Who in your life needs forgiveness from you? I'd recommend go take care of that right now. Turn this off. Go take care of giving someone a second chance, showing them forgiveness, and being willing to work with them. Because it might be what needs to happen, right? In this instance, it was exactly what God needed and what God had planned. What other people maybe meant for evil, God meant for good. So if you have something like that you need to take care of, I definitely recommend you go do that right now. But as we continue, when you're faced with those tough situations, like Joseph often faced, right? He was in many tough situations. Luckily, I've never been sold into slavery. I've never been in prison. And, never had my siblings want to kill me. I don't think. You'd have to ask them about that one. But I have sought revenge before. I have tried to plant something on somebody. I have done some of the same things that Joseph has done. But I also hope I can say I've also done some of the great things that Joseph has done, right? Had integrity, trusted in God's promises, realized God's plan for it all, and forgive like there's no end, right? So when you're when you're faced with those tough situations, like Joseph often faced, you can think to yourself, what would Joseph do? And I think he would do a lot of things, right? He would probably tell us, if he could speak to us and say what he would do, it'd probably be something like this, right? Maybe Joseph's advice. Always trust in the gifts God's given you, even when people try to tell you differently, right? He knew that God gave him this ability to see these dreams and eventually interpret these dreams, and he wasn't going to let someone say any differently, right? He told his brothers that they didn't like it, but he still knew that was a gift from God. Secondly, integrity and obedience are always the right thing to do. Right? That's always the right thing to do. Having integrity, being obedient to what God has called you to do. And another thing, God never leaves you, right? Even in his darkest moments, God was still with him. He saw God had favor on him, right? So many times we see that phrase, God had favor on him, and God helped him in this situation, and God let him rise up to power in Egypt and all these different things. And then the final two things we kind of talked about a little bit already is people deserve second chances, even when we don't think they do. I think they deserve second chances because I've needed second chances, so I want to be a kind of person that gives second chances. And to trust God's process and timing, right? Had he not trusted in God's process and timing, we may not have had this story, right? Had he not trusted in God's process and timing, what would have happened? Who knows, right? A famine across the whole world at that time, the whole known world, would have been devastating, right? But because Joseph trusted in God's promise and timing, he was able to help many people. And then you get to that kind of message again, right? That what was meant for evil, God means for good. Now, Joseph isn't a perfect person, but he's a great example for us, for all of us to look to when we are in situations where people have hurt us, when people have done evil against us, where we find ourselves in difficult circumstances. He's a great example to look to. And in that moment, we need to see God's plan for it all, right? Trust his process and his timing. Because, like I said, what others mean for evil, God means for good. God had such great plans for Joseph. And, another thing we could add there is that nothing was going to stop God's plans. He knew what the people needed, and he had this plan to get that to the people. It just looked a little differently. Other people tried to make it evil, but God still used it for good. So thanks for joining us tonight. I hope this has been an encouragement to you, and just been a midweek pick-me-up, if you will. And I really hope we can see everybody on Sunday morning, Bible class at 9 a.m. and worship time at 10 a.m. And reminder, Sunday morning care groups are launching. There'll be a meal after church, so you can kind of check out all the care groups, see which ones you might want to be a part of. So be praying about that in the next few days, because that will be happening on Sunday. So a lot of good things happening in the life of the church. Hope you guys have a great night. We'll see you next week.